Okay, so as you can see from the title slide here, my talk will be on toddler teething. I've only been allocated 10 minutes to consider this topic, and I thought it would be best to consider pertinent areas of diabetes care based on my experience as a clinician working with this population. I'll focus on insulin injections and conventional self-blood glucose monitoring, as opposed to talking about use of diabetes-related technologies. Just in view of the time allowance. So with that, I'll get started. Okay, so blood glucose. So most toddlers with type 1 diabetes will need or have their blood glucose routinely monitored at least 4 times per day, just the same as adults. While parents may have to or should check the toddler's blood glucose more often if there is suspected hypo or hyperglycemia, I tend to find that many parents test more frequently regardless. Essentially, parents find blood glucose monitoring is a great source of reassurance, and this is totally understandable. Naturally, availability of testing supplies and associated costs comes into play here. So when advising the blood glucose monitoring regime, I really want to point out that it's of great importance that parents do undertake tests during the night time when the toddler is arguably most vulnerable to adverse blood glucose. You as healthcare professionals can help guide the frequency of this. We've probably all experienced or heard of stories relating to toddlers who blatantly refuse to have their blood glucose checked, despite the efforts of parents to convince them otherwise. I certainly know that I have. I find that it often comes down to choice, essentially helping a toddler become more involved in their care and foster independence. For example, you could ask the toddler which site they would like to have their blood glucose taken from. This will likely work better than choosing on their behalf. When blood glucose is out of range, it's important that parents try to keep their facial expressions neutral and not show immense unhappiness, and you can certainly emphasize this point. The idea is that thinking ahead, parents will want their child to be honest about their blood glucose measurements, letting the child know that it's generally okay to have occasional blood glucose levels out of the defined target range will help them, the child, to be honest into the future. This is a tough one though. Okay, so insulin dosages are usually very small for the toddler, often somewhere in the realm of 0.25 to 0.5 units per kilogram. This can, however, vary due to a multitude of factors, usually a mix of intermediate acting, rapid or ultra rapid acting insulins, and administration using devices that allow for half unit increments, whether this be syringes or pen devices are employed. I understand that a particular pen device from Eli Lilly that allows for half unit dosages is available in India. When considering food intake, many of you with children will know that many toddlers don't eat when you want them to. So with this in mind, it's often best for insulin to be administered once they have eaten, so as to reduce the risk of hyperglycemia. It's going to help provide reassurance not only to the healthcare professional, but also the toddler's parents. And with this in mind, ultra-rapid acting insulin may be the best choice for parents of toddlers who are picky eaters. The ultra-rapid acting nature of this type of insulin allows the parent to dose the insulin directly after food is eaten without incurring prolonged periods of hyperglycemia. Another option can be used of a sliding scale for insulin dosing based on the blood glucose level. So there are many medications and devices available that can assist if insulin injections, for example, hurt to the level that things just aren't happening. You know, ice, for example, can be used to help numb the skin for an injection, but I do have to mention that it could be argued that perhaps this is not the best route to take in order to enable long-term acceptance of and adherence to the necessary management regime of a chronic condition. But yeah, if it works, just make sure you've got the right size needle lengths and gauges. So the literature indicates that it's beneficial for diabetes care to be undertaken in one location, preferably away from the toddler's bedroom. The idea behind this is that their bedroom, for example, can be considered a sanctuary or a safe space where they are not subject to having to have blood glucose checks undertaken or insulin injections administered. Having diabetes care undertaken in one place helps create routine, which certainly can assist with them, the toddler, adapting to their diabetes management procedures. Going off on a slight tangent here, when trying to perform medical procedures on toddlers, I found it best to let them know what you're going to do, letting them watch as you demonstrate. That said, when considering insulin, I found it best to take the least time possible to administer this, or should I say undertake the procedure, as you really don't want to give a toddler too much time to think about it. As with any group, always remain calm, provide reassurance, and always let young children know when you're coming to give them an insulin injection or check their blood glucose levels, as opposed to just literally springing it on them out of the blue. The same principles apply when considering parents. Okay, so as with anyone with type 1 diabetes, meal planning is of great importance for a toddler. While the well-balanced diet they should be receiving shouldn't really be that much different to that of anyone else, including other toddlers without diabetes, there is an obvious need to pay close attention to volumes and types of carbohydrate. A regular meal schedule is generally important, with multiple small meals and snacks generally being required. When it comes to celebrations, this is a sort of debate in the diabetes community. The thought is generally not to restrict certain foods and to allow the toddler to eat as if he or she didn't have diabetes. With advanced communication that the event or celebration, I know the birthday party, will be happening, you can help with any necessary insulin planning and adjustments. Moving on to exercise now, as you probably already know, most toddlers are into everything. They always seem to be moving around, using up lots of energy. This is a good thing when considering the well-documented benefits of exercise and wider benefits of play. However, that said, the next day they can be much less active, which ultimately causes havoc when trying to create a diabetes management plan. While it's always best for each bout of exercise to be considered on a case-by-case basis, for extra activities that are above and beyond the normal play routine, it's often a good idea to provide extra carbohydrate. It should always be ensured that supplies for determining blood glucose and treating hyperglycemia, where applicable, are immediately available. I have heard some debate about the need for toddlers to wear some form of medical identification. Personally, I think it's a good idea where possible. Most commonly though, in toddlers, a bracelet is more suitable than a necklace for obvious reasons. So moving on to hyperglycemia, I note that I've only got a few minutes remaining. Often initial concerns relating to hyperglycemia may come from parents or others close to the toddler, suspecting that something may be wrong. When we think of signs and symptoms of hyperglycemia in a toddler, we often think of irritability, acting differently than usual, crying that's not usual, sweating, shaking, and unsteady gait. On the other hand, though, if a toddler is overly fussy or sleepy, they're wetting more nappies, or should I say diapers than usual, or they're getting a lot of infections, they may be having hyperglycemia. So there's a bit of a reliance on the signs and symptoms here. Treatment principles for hyperglycemia are generally the same for all people with type 1 diabetes. That said, in a toddler, you may only need a smaller amount of carbohydrate to treat low blood glucose. It's often handy to have a syringe on hand so that oral glucose-containing liquids can be administered. Although, as always, you should never force fluids or liquids if the toddler is unconscious. When considering sick days, it's important that you as healthcare professionals provide a sick day management plan for the toddler. It's amazing how many events occur at times when there is no access to the diabetes team. 1 o'clock on a Saturday night. This plan is usually made up by the physician and diabetes educator ahead of time. And parents can be advised to look for clues relating to diabetes that I've just discussed. So some final points, just try to involve other family members and the child's other siblings in the care that you provide. The more education that's received, the more people there are to help on a day-to-day basis. For example, everyone in the family should be aware of steps to take and what to do in the event of hyperglycemia. Finally, I think it's important to talk about stress, as there is no doubt that parents of a toddler with type 1 diabetes will likely have this in abundance. While you as healthcare professionals can help by undertaking your everyday diabetes-related work, it is important that you are accessible. The quicker questions are asked, answered, and problems averted, the better for all. So in closing, the emphasis really needs to be placed on reducing acute and chronic type 1 diabetes related complications, all while helping the toddler to have, as much as possible, a typical childhood. Thank you.